It begins in silence, the kind that feels alive, stretching across the black sea of stars, a silence so old it seems to breathe. Around a dying red star, a small outpost drifts like a ghost, its hull cracked, its lights dim, its walls whispering with the echoes of time. Inside sits Tor, an old alien whose skin carries the faint glow of his once royal lineage, now faded like dust beneath the fading light. His hands tremble as he reaches for a data crystal, an object so old that no archive can read it anymore. He has lived too long, seen too much, and the centuries have turned his proud voice into a whisper. Once, he was the voice of the Zarth Dominion, the one who spoke before the Galactic Council, the one who commanded fleets and treaties. Now, he lives alone in silence, exiled, forgotten, waiting for the last sunrise that will never come. He looks out the cracked viewport at the red star, its light pulsing weakly like a dying heart, and he murmurs to himself, "It is almost time." The room is filled with the hum of old machines struggling to stay alive. Dust floats in the stale air, catching faint streaks of light like fading memories. On a nearby console, an ancient transmission beacon flickers, the last link between this forgotten place and the galaxy that abandoned it. Tor leans closer, his breath fogging the screen, and opens a small metallic case. Inside lies a symbol, a small silver crest shaped like two hands reaching toward each other. One human, one alien. His eyes, dim and old, soften when he sees it. "I kept it safe," he whispers, his voice trembling. "Even when they said your kind was gone, I remembered." He presses his trembling fingers against the crest, and a faint pulse of blue light glows from it. For a moment, the air feels different, warmer, almost alive. The memories come flooding back like light through broken glass. He remembers the fires of Zarth Prime when the Great Plague spread through the cities and millions died screaming. He remembers the day the skies opened, and human ships descended through the storm, bringing medicine, food, and light. He remembers the faces, the humans, strange and kind, their eyes full of determination. One of them, a woman with silver streaks in her dark hair, had taken his hand as the world burned behind them and said, "No debt lasts forever, Vale. When your world needs help, call, and we will come." Then she was gone, swallowed by time, and the stars forgot her name. For centuries, he carried those words like a secret prayer. The Galactic Council called humanity extinct after the Purge Wars. They erased every human record, burned every human planet, and forbade even their name to be spoken in the chambers of law. But Tor never forgot. He owed them a debt, not of money, not of war, but of life itself. His people survived because of the humans. And now, with his last breath approaching, he feels that promise calling again through the dark. He coughs, the sound harsh and painful, his body trembling under the weight of time. The machines beep faintly, their tones uneven. He ignores them and looks once more at the red star. "Old friend," he says softly, "I will not see another dawn." He leans forward and activates the transmitter, ancient circuits humming weakly. The beacon screen glows, displaying a blank field awaiting input. Tor's voice is barely audible as he records the message. 7 simple words that carry the weight of 1,000 years. The debt of Zarth Prime must be repaid. His finger presses the send command, and a faint hum vibrates through the floor as the beacon powers up, releasing a golden pulse that drifts into the void. The light travels across the dying system, past the broken moons, through the nebulae where no ship has flown for centuries. It crosses forgotten trade routes and the cold ruins of empires that once ruled the stars. The signal passes through the border stations of the Galactic Council, their operators confused by its strange signature. A human frequency, encrypted in codes older than their archives. Some try to block it, others try to decode it, but the message moves faster than any of them can react, bouncing through the relay networks, rewriting its own path as if guided by invisible hands. Far away, beyond the Council's reach, hidden deep behind the Orion Veil, lies a dark world that no map marks, a planet wrapped in silence and shadow. Beneath its frozen surface lies a vast complex, Terran Command. For over a century, It has slept. Rows of silent machines stand buried under ice and steel, watched over by quiet minds who never forgot their duty. When the signal arrives, it hits the old relay tower like a heartbeat after centuries of stillness. Alarms that haven't sounded in generations begin to glow red. Across the underground halls, lights flicker one by one, screens awaken, and ancient emblems appear, the insignia of the Terran fleet. In the command center, a woman in a dark coat walks toward the central console. Her eyes are sharp, her expression unreadable. She is Commander Arya Ward, descendant of the last fleet admiral who led humanity into hiding. She reads the message on the main screen. 7 words blink softly. The debt of Zarth Prime must be repaid. For a long moment, she says nothing. The officers nearby stare at her, unsure what it means. Then she whispers the old phrase, one her ancestors passed down through blood and silence. A promise made must be kept. The chamber fills with quiet awe as she turns to her crew. "Wake the network," she orders softly. "It's time." A young technician hesitates. "Commander, we've been silent for 100 years. The Council will know we're alive." Arya's eyes flash. "Then let them remember." Across the planet, the ground trembles. Hidden doors open beneath the ice, and enormous shapes rise slowly into the frozen sky. Warships made of dark metal, silent as shadows. Their engines light up one by one, and the cold night fills with a faint golden glow. From orbit, the planet looks alive again. Thousands of human ships begin to power on, each bearing the same emblem Veiltor once held, the 2 hands reaching for one another. In the farthest corners of the galaxy, old sensors long thought dead begin to reactivate, picking up faint human signals. In the halls of the Galactic Council, alarms ring as data floods their systems. Unknown transmissions detected. Origin. Sol Sector. Panic spreads through the delegates. "Impossible," says the High Speaker. "Earth was purged generations ago." But the signals continue, old Earth codes, broadcasting in patterns no one has seen in centuries. And then, across every major relay in the galaxy, one message repeats in every known language, simple and cold. Acknowledged. We remember. Back on the outpost near the dying star, Veiltor hears the faint echo of the transmission through his failing comms. The sound is weak, but he knows that voice, the tone, the precision, the rhythm, human. Tears fill his eyes. He laughs softly, the sound trembling like cracked glass. "You came," he whispers. "You really came." His hands fall still, and the old beacon fades into silence once more, its task complete. Outside, the red star flickers for the last time, its light reflecting off the silver crest on the table. The symbol of 2 hands, one alien, one human, reaching for each other across the dark. The story moves now beyond the small outpost, out into the vastness of space where whispers become storms. Every listening station across the sectors records the human transmission. Every intelligence bureau races to decrypt it. On capital worlds, leaders hold emergency meetings, arguing if it's real or a hoax. But one truth they cannot deny: the voice patterns, the encryption style, the pulse frequency, all match the ancient Terran code. It is them. The humans have returned. On the Council's primary world of Lyrith, a group of old war veterans gather in secret. They fought in the Purge Wars long ago, when humanity was nearly erased. One of them, a scarred general with a mechanical arm, listens to the recording in silence. When the voice ends, he looks at the others and says quietly, "We made them extinct, and they remember." Meanwhile, back on Earth's hidden base, the command staff works in near silence. Commander Arya walks through the observation deck as massive starships rise into orbit. Each vessel is a relic of another age, forged in silence, refined by centuries of patience. They were built not for conquest, but for promises kept. The AI cores awaken, and the ship names appear on the status boards: Eidolon, Prometheus, Sol Requiem, Andromeda's Oath. Each name carries the weight of human history, of loss and survival. Arya stands before the glass and watches the first sunrise of a world that has waited too long. She whispers, "You kept your promise, old one." Now we will keep ours. In the quiet of his small room, Veiltor lies still, eyes half open, his breathing shallow. Around him, the machines fade one by one. The sound of his heart monitor slows until it stops completely. But in the silence that follows, a soft chime rings from the communication array, a confirmation signal, human in origin. The system automatically marks his transmission as received. Somewhere in the galaxy, the promise has been accepted. The last light of the red star fills the room, touching his face like the memory of a sunrise. For the first time in centuries, Veiltor smiles. The debt, he whispers with his final breath, is remembered, and with that, the old alien slips into stillness, his final message carried on the endless wind of stars. The galaxy itself seems to pause. In distant nebulae, travelers look up as their ship's sensors flicker with strange readings. In the cities of the Council worlds, old archivists whisper of legends they were told never to speak. The humans, the ones who walked through fire and never asked for thanks. Across colonies and forgotten moons, the name Terran begins to stir again in the dark corners of conversation. Fear and hope mix like shadow and light. And in the deep space between galaxies, a voice older than any empire whispers across encrypted channels. We are awake. The first part closes in the quiet hum of rebirth. One old promise carried through time. One dying alien's final message answered by a civilization thought long gone. The galaxy that once mocked humanity now waits in silence, unsure if mercy or judgment travels with that single phrase that began it all. Acknowledged. We remembered that it had been 112 years since a human voice was heard beyond the Sol system, and now the entire galaxy could not sleep. The words acknowledged, we remember, echoed through every channel, bouncing off relay networks and whispering through static like a ghost returned from the dead. On the Council's central world of Lyrith, diplomats and admirals argued for endless hours, each voice rising with fear. Some believed the humans had perished long ago. Others claimed this was a trap, a psychological tactic by rebels or smugglers. Yet deep down, none of them could ignore what their instruments confirmed. The transmission's encryption matched an extinct Terran frequency, precise, unforgeable, untouched since the Purge, the oldest among them. Those who had fought in that war went silent, remembering what the humans were capable of, remembering how their fleets disappeared into the void, not destroyed but withdrawn. As if waiting, and now it seemed they were done. Waiting, the galaxy was about to meet them again. Across the border sectors, space was no longer still. Strange signatures began to appear at the edges of sensor range, distortions that bent gravity in unnatural ways. Patrols were sent to investigate but never returned. Scanners failed. Communications vanished mid-sentence, and soon, traders, pirates, and explorers alike began to speak of shadows moving through the nebulae. Enormous shapes that drifted without sound, ships with no known transponder codes. Cloaked in darkness, silent but deliberate, the rumors spread fast. The lost humans were coming back, not as conquerors perhaps, but as something even more unsettling. Witnesses of their own legend. In the far reaches of the Zarth system, the dying world that once begged for help now stirred again under the faded red light of its sun. The cities of Zarth Prime lay mostly in ruin, their great towers corroded, their energy grids flickering with the last breaths of power. The old alien Veiltor's final message had reached farther than he could have ever known, and now his people, who had long cursed his name for believing in humans, gathered around the temple where his outposts last. Coordinates pointed. They waited under a sky that shimmered with thin clouds of ash and light, wondering if the myths were true, wondering if the beings who had once saved them would ever return. Until at last, a sound like distant thunder rolled across the horizon, faint at first, then growing louder, until the ground itself began to tremble. From the burning clouds above, a single dark shape emerged, descending slowly, a vast ship unlike anything the galaxy had seen in centuries. It moved with a quiet grace that made even the air hold its breath. Its hull black as obsidian, streaked with lines of gold light that pulsed like veins. At its center glowed the emblem. The two hands reaching for each other, human and alien united in metal. As the ship broke through the clouds, its engines whispered rather than roared, the sound deep and soft, like the heartbeat of something alive. The crowd below fell silent, and when the landing struts touched the ground, a wave of dust swept over the ruins, warm and bright under the red sun. From within the colossal vessel, a ramp descended, and a group of figures stepped out, their silhouettes tall and steady against the light, their faces hidden behind dark helmets with faint blue visors, their movements slow, disciplined, but not hostile. Leading them was Captain Elias Ward, his presence quiet but commanding, his uniform simple, dark gray marked only by the Terran emblem over his heart. His voice calm as he said softly into his comms. Atmosphere stable, proceed with first contact. Around him the alien observers watched, afraid to speak. Some knelt, others hid, unsure if this was salvation or judgment. The captain walked across the dust toward the old beacon tower, now little more than broken metal and rust. His gloved hands brushed against the ancient transmitter that had called them here. His helmet retracted with a soft hiss, revealing a weary human face, lined but strong, eyes full of something deeper than authority, memory. He knelt beside the wreckage and pulled out a small box from his coat. Inside was a folded piece of cloth and an old holographic chip. He set it gently on the ground, pressed a key, and the chip came alive, projecting a flickering image of Vale Tor's younger face. Smiling, hopeful, alive, the message looped his final words. The debt of Zarth Prime must be repaid. The crowd behind gasped. Some cried quietly, realizing it was real. The old legend was no story, it had been a promise. Elias turned to them, his voice steady and soft. We heard him, he said. We remembered and we came. His translator echoed his words in their tongue, trembling with static. One elder stepped forward, his voice shaking. We thought your kind was gone. Elias nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. We were, he said. For a time we chose silence, we waited for the right reason to speak again. Your elder gave us that reason. He turned back toward the ship, signaling his crew, and soon, from the vessel's lower hold, machines emerged, sleek drones carrying medical pods, energy cells, and crystalline containers that pulsed faintly with blue light. These are for your people, Elias said. Your cities will breathe again. The aliens stood in disbelief, watching as the humans moved like a quiet storm, efficient and focused, repairing power lines, restoring water systems, setting up communication towers, all without demand or question. The humans asked for nothing in return. They simply worked, and the more they did, the more the aliens wept, realizing the kindness they had once betrayed was still alive, unbroken by centuries of hate. But not everyone was ready to accept this miracle. High above, orbiting warships of the Galactic Council watched every move, their captains growing uneasy, messages flashed between fleets, human vessels confirmed, unregistered ship class, authorization for engagement requested. But the Council hesitated, fear crawling through every word of their debate. One admiral, old enough to remember the last war, warned, "Do not strike first, for if you strike, you will not strike twice." And so, the fleets held position, waiting, scanning, trembling, unable to decide if they were witnessing the dawn of peace or the edge of extinction. On the ground, the humans continued, their presence quiet but unstoppable. One of the alien children approached Elias, offering him a small flower, a rare bloom that had grown through cracked stone. He smiled faintly, took it gently, and placed it beside Vale Tor's memorial stone, whispering. He believed when no one else did. Behind him, an officer approached. Captain, incoming transmission, encrypted council code. Elias sighed softly. Put it through. The air shimmered, and the holographic form of the council speaker appeared, his tone sharp. Human vessel, you are trespassing in protected territory. Withdraw immediately. Elias looked at him calmly. We came to repay a debt. The speaker sneered. We require no repayment. Elias' eyes hardened. No, but you require memory, and we have not forgotten. With that, the signal cut, leaving only silence. That night, under the red light of the fading sun, the human crew gathered near the rebuilt tower. Their faces illuminated by the soft hum of the equipment. Elias stood apart, watching the sky, lost in thought. One of his lieutenants asked quietly, "Do you think the council will attack?" Elias replied after a long pause, "They might, but we will not be the ones to start this war. We did not come for vengeance." He looked down at the small flower resting near his boot. We came because one old alien believed in us when the galaxy did not. His voice grew softer. And because we still believe in the promise. As darkness settled over Zarth Prime, lights flickered back to life across the ruined city, faint but steady. Like hope reborn, alien families gathered under restored domes, feeling warmth for the first time in generations. The children pointed at the sky where the human ship glowed faintly like a new star. Whispers spread through the streets. The Terrans returned. The humans keep their word. The debt is real. And somewhere deep in the heart of the Galactic Council's grand chamber, fear began to bloom, for if humanity's return began with kindness, it meant something far more dangerous was coming next. The proof that they had grown beyond vengeance, that they had returned with conscience, and conscience was a power the Council could never control. The next morning, the people of Zarth Prime awoke to a strange sight. The air was cleaner, the sky clearer, and a massive holographic image shimmered across the capital ruins. The face of Veiltor appeared, projected by the human ship systems, his voice calm and warm. "My people," the message said, "I told you once that mercy is stronger than fear. Today, they prove it true. The humans did not forget us, and now, it is our turn not to forget them." When the message ended, thousands wept, openly, kneeling in silence as the human ship's engines hummed softly above. Elias Ward stood at the viewport of his command deck, watching the red sun burn low, its light spilling across the surface of the once-dead world. His reflection ghosted against the glass, eyes steady, filled with quiet pride. Behind him, his officer spoke. "Sir, we've completed the power restoration, and the hospitals are operational. What are your orders?" Elias turned slowly. "We stay until the last system breathes again. Then we leave them as we found them, alive." He paused, his voice dropping. "The galaxy will learn that humans do not vanish, we endure, and we keep our word." He looked back toward the stars, the faint shimmer of Council ships glinting far above, and whispered to the empty air, "Let them watch, let them remember." Far above the planet, the Council fleets held formation, uneasy, scanning the single Terran warship that had restored a world in mere hours. Their sensors reported no weapons fired, no hostilities, no casualties, only life returning where death had reigned, and that truth terrified them more than any weapon, for it meant the humans had found a strength the galaxy had never understood. Mercy with power, silence with purpose, memory with meaning, and as the sun sank below the horizon of Zarth Prime, the name Terran was spoken again across the stars, not as a warning, but as a whisper of awe, and in that quiet, every heart, human or alien, knew the same truth was rising again. Humanity had returned, not to demand repayment, but to remind the galaxy of the promise that binds all life. The promise that had begun with one dying alien and a single message drifting through the dark. The debt of Zarth Prime had been repaid, but something greater had been awakened, the memory of who humans truly were. The sun over Zarth Prime rose weakly, its red light spilling across the rebuilt towers and metallic plains that now shimmered with new energy. The world was breathing again. The air smelled of life, but beneath the quiet surface, unease rippled through the galaxy like a silent current. The Galactic Council gathered in emergency session, their grand chamber filled with murmurs and fear. Holographic projections of Zarth Prime played in the air above the delegates, showing human engineers rebuilding entire districts in hours, machines capable of rewriting molecular decay, purifying water, and healing disease. The delegates whispered among themselves. How could a species declared extinct wield such power? What had they become in their silence? One counselor from the Vorn Dominion slammed his clawed fist on the table, his voice sharp. "They mock us. This is not mercy. This is dominance in disguise." Another replied quietly, "No. This is something else. They are not acting like conquerors. They act like guardians." The word hung in the air like a ghost, ancient and dangerous. And in that moment, every being in that chamber realized that humanity's return had changed the order of the galaxy forever. On Zarth Prime, Captain Elias Ward stood before the monument of Veiltor, now restored and surrounded by alien children laying flowers. His reflection shimmered faintly in the polished metal of the statue's base. The engraved words below it glowed softly in both Terran and Zarth script. "Mercy is not weakness. Memory is not vengeance." Elias traced the letters with his fingers, the words sinking into his heart like echoes of home. He had read about Veiltor in the hidden archives, how the old alien had saved human refugees when the rest of the galaxy had hunted them, how he had sheltered their children, how his kindness had been erased from history, and now, standing where the debt was born, Elias felt something deep stir inside him, something beyond duty, beyond command. It was the realization that this mission was not about technology or politics. It was about a promise made in the ashes of extinction. In the capital square, the human engineers had finished constructing a new energy nexus, a massive spire that would power the entire planet for centuries. Its surface reflected the rising sun, and at its peak glowed the emblem of the Terran Union, two hands meeting in the center of a starburst. The aliens watched in awe as the spire activated, flooding the city with golden light. The once dead world now looked alive again, green fields spreading across the horizon where wasteland once ruled, laughter echoing in the streets, hope reborn, and through it all, the humans worked quietly, never boasting, never demanding, their silence more powerful than any speech. But far beyond that peace, the Council prepared their response. Fleets repositioned, codes were exchanged, orders written in cold language. Observe, assess, contain. The old fear of humanity returned to the heart of every commander. In the hidden chambers beneath the Council Hall, the High Speaker met with the heads of the Dominion fleets, their faces tense. "We cannot allow them to expand," the Speaker said, his voice trembling despite his attempt at authority. "If one Terran ship can restore a world in a day, imagine what a fleet could do. They could end us without firing a single shot." Another general leaned forward, his tone bitter. "They already have, sir, not by war, but by example." The room went silent. No one dared speak further, for they all understood what he meant. Humanity had just proven that compassion could move faster than conquest. That same evening, Elias received a secure transmission aboard his ship. The lights dimmed as the holographic image of Commander Arya Ward appeared. Her expression calm but her eyes sharp. "Report, Captain," she said. Elias stood straight. "Zarth Prime is stable. Their power restored, water clean, the people safe. We completed our objective." Arya studied him silently for a moment, then asked, "And the Council?" Elias hesitated, his jaw tightening. "Watching us, preparing. They fear what they do not understand." Arya nodded slowly. "They always did." Her voice softened slightly. "Do they know the truth?" Elias frowned. "Not yet, and maybe they shouldn't." Arya looked away for a moment, her reflection fading in the holographic light. "Keep the secret, Elias. The promise was made in silence, and silence will protect it." The connection faded, leaving Elias alone with the hum of the ship and the faint rhythm of the engines that sounded almost like a heartbeat. Down below, among the alien crowds, a young girl named Sira wandered through the restored market district, clutching a small holographic charm shaped like the Terran crest. She had never seen a human before this week, and yet she felt no fear, only curiosity. She watched as human workers smiled at her people, teaching them how to use the new energy grids and filtration systems. The humans seemed gentle, like teachers from another time. One of them knelt to fix her charm when it broke. A tall man with kind eyes who said softly, "Keep this safe. It means more than you think." She didn't know his name, but that moment stayed in her heart. Later that night, she told her mother, "They look at us the way we look at the stars." And her mother smiled faintly, replying, "Maybe they see what we forgot." But peace never stays untouched for long, and as days passed, Council agents began spreading fear among the neighboring systems, warning that the humans were manipulating Zarth Prime, enslaving them under the illusion of mercy. Propaganda filled the channels. Terrans return with gifts that chain the soul. The messages declared. Some began to believe, others doubted, and soon tension grew. Council patrols began entering Zarth's space, monitoring every movement. One night, 3 Council frigates approached the Terran ship's orbit, sending out warnings. "Unidentified vessel, disengage operations and depart." Elias stood at the command deck, calm as always. "Maintain position," he said. The frigates circled like vultures, their weapons primed, until suddenly, their power systems began to fail one by one. Lights flickered, engines stilled. No shots fired, just silence. Elias didn't move. No harm, he ordered. Just reminder. The frigates drifted helplessly for hours before, retreating, and the Council learned again that human power needed no noise to be feared. Later, in the quiet of the memorial chamber, Elias stood before the hologram of Veiltor, his voice low. "You carried this debt longer than we carried our silence," he said. "You believed in us when no one else did, and now, it's our turn to believe in what you stood for." He reached into his coat and placed a small silver pendant beside the hologram, engraved with the word remember, then turned to leave, his boots echoing softly through the chamber. Behind him, the holographic Veiltor smiled, faintly, almost alive in the flickering light, as if his spirit finally found peace. Across the stars, news of Zarth Prime's rebirth spread faster than any fleet. Worlds that had long suffered under the Council's indifference began whispering of hope. The humans healed a dead planet, they said. They brought life without asking anything in return. Small colonies began sending signals into deep space, coded in old Terran frequencies, prayers disguised as transmissions, hoping that maybe the humans would hear them too. And somewhere in the void, deep under the glow of a silent nebula, the Terran fleet listened, their sensors picking up each signal, logging them quietly, not answering yet, just listening, waiting, as if deciding who among the stars still remembered kindness. The Council grew desperate, their broadcasts filled with orders and fear, demanding that no world communicate with the Terrans. But it was too late. The idea had already spread, and ideas, once born, cannot be destroyed. The galaxy began to change, slowly, like the thawing of a long winter. The humans had lit a spark that no law could extinguish, a spark made of faith, debt, and mercy, and in that quiet transformation, one truth became clear to every living mind that watched from afar. Humanity had returned not to rule, not to conquer, but to remind the galaxy of what it had forgotten, that strength was never in domination, but in the courage to keep a promise. And as the red sun set once more over Zarth Prime, Captain Elias Ward looked to the sky where stars flickered like distant candles. He thought of Earth, of the silence that had protected them for so long, of the countless generations that had prepared for this moment, and he whispered into the comms. "The debt is not just theirs, it's ours too, for we owe the galaxy the truth of who we are." His ship rose slowly into the twilight, engines glowing gold against the fading light, and somewhere, beyond the stars, unseen but watching, 1,000 more Terran vessels began to move, their wakes leaving trails of light across the void like signatures written by destiny itself, and the galaxy, for the first time in ages, looked upward not in fear, but in awe, realizing that the return of humanity was not the end of an age, but the beginning of one. The council chamber was in chaos, a storm of voices echoing through the vast dome of glass and light. Alien ambassadors shouted over each other, their holographic displays flickering as fear overtook reason. Reports from Zarth Prime flooded in faster than anyone could read. The humans had restored an entire planet, neutralized a blockade fleet without firing a single weapon, and left the population united under their protection. The speaker slammed his staff against the floor, trying to restore order, his voice trembling though he tried to sound firm. "We cannot allow this to continue. Humanity's return threatens the balance of power." But the chamber no longer echoed with confidence. It echoed with fear, real and ancient. Fear that every old legend had been true. Fear that the species once mocked as primitive had risen again, silent and unstoppable. An older delegate from the archives spoke quietly, but his words cut deeper than any threat. "Perhaps the balance was broken long ago when we betrayed them," and silence fell heavier than stone. On Zarth Prime, the air shimmered under the pale light of the red sun. The city now pulsed with energy drawn from the Terran spire. Rivers flowed clean. Crops grew across once dead soil. The aliens walked freely through markets filled with color and laughter. And yet behind every smile there was the same quiet question whispered again and again. Why had they come back? Why show mercy instead of vengeance? Captain Elias Ward stood at the edge of a cliff overlooking the glowing plains. The wind carried the faint hum of machines and the laughter of children below. His mind heavy with thoughts he could not escape. Behind him walked his second-in-command, Lieutenant Maravas, her voice soft. "The people adore us, but the council will not. They are moving fleets near the border. Elias nodded slowly. They will test us, he said. And when they do, we must show them restraint, not wrath. She looked at him, puzzled. Even if they fire first? Elias' gaze drifted to the horizon. Especially then. Later that night, under the twin moons, the humans gathered in their base camp, lights glowing faintly against the alien sand. The crew sat in quiet reflection, exhausted but calm. Elias stood apart near the fire, holding a data pad showing Veiltor's last transmission logs, words recorded in his dying breath. Mercy lasts longer than fear. Elias whispered the phrase to himself like a prayer, his heart heavy with the weight of that truth. Humanity had rebuilt its strength in silence, hidden in dark worlds far from the Council's reach, but power alone was never their purpose. They had waited for meaning, and now it had arrived in the form of one old alien's faith. The promise was more than a mission, it was redemption. At dawn, the humans prepared to leave orbit, their ship gleaming under the red sun. The aliens gathered in crowds, begging them to stay, gifts offered, songs sung in gratitude. Elias stood before them, his voice amplified but calm. Your elder Veiltor believed in a future where life is not measured by power but by kindness. Keep that belief alive, and we will have already repaid our debt. His words were simple, but they struck deep. Many wept openly, realizing they might never see these beings again. When the ramp closed and the engines roared softly, the crowd fell silent, watching the Terran warship rise into the clouds, leaving behind a world reborn. But far above, in the darkness of space, the Council's response had already begun. A massive fleet of warships drifted in formation, hundreds of vessels bristling with weapons. The flagship Karth Dominion led the line, its admiral watching through cold eyes. Target the Terran vessel, he ordered. Disable engines, no survivors. The crews obeyed with trembling hands, knowing the name of their enemy, knowing what it meant to fight them. Within seconds, energy cannons charged, space filled with blue light, but before the first shot could fire, every screen aboard the fleet flickered to black, static screamed through the channels, and then a single phrase appeared on every console in glowing white letters. Do not make us remember war. The admiral froze, his heart racing. Who sent this? He shouted, but the communications officer's voice cracked. Sir, it came from within our own system, as if the signal was already here. Panic rippled through the bridge, alarms blared, one by one. The ship's reactors shut down, not by force, but by something unseen. A gentle silence spreading through the fleet, lights dimming, engines falling quiet, and in the endless void, the Terran ship glided between them, slow, graceful, untouchable, its hull glowing faintly with gold light. No weapons drawn, no threats spoken, only the presence of something greater than power, the weight of restraint. Elias stood on the command deck, watching the dark sea of motionless enemy ships around them, his officers tense, awaiting his order. Sir, we have control. Should we disable their weapons permanently? Elias shook his head. No, restore them. The officer blinked, shocked. Restore them, sir? Elias' voice was steady. They need to understand that mercy is not weakness. And with a single command, the human ship reactivated the enemy systems. One by one, lights flickered back across the Council fleet. Their captain stunned, weapons online again. But no damage done, no casualties, just a quiet lesson left behind. The Terran vessel accelerated, disappearing into hyperspace without a trace, leaving behind only a silent message encoded in the void. We came to repay, not to rule. News of the encounter spread across the stars within hours. The galaxy trembled. The humans had faced a full fleet without destruction, without death, without war, and yet emerged victorious, their strength unmatched, their compassion unshaken. For the first time in history, empires began to question what true power meant. The Council called an emergency meeting, but none could agree on how to proceed. Attacking them again would be suicide. Ignoring them would be denial. One younger delegate whispered, "Perhaps it is not them who threaten the balance. Perhaps it is us who broke it." But no one dared to repeat his words aloud. Meanwhile, in a distant sector, the Terran fleet gathered in secret, Hidden beneath the shadow of a blue dwarf star, hundreds of ships materialized in silence, their formation perfect, their energy signatures cloaked. In the center stood the flagship Eidolon, and aboard it, Commander Arya Ward received Elias' transmission, his face projected before her. "The mission is complete," he said. "But the Council will not stop, they are afraid." Arya's eyes narrowed. "Fear can move faster than light. Captain, we must decide what humanity stands for now." Elias' voice was quiet. "We stand for the promise, not for conquest." She nodded slowly. "Then we show them not what they expect, but what they forgot." And in that single sentence, the course of the galaxy began to change. Days later, across multiple systems, strange occurrences began. Abandoned colonies found supplies left at their gates. Dying worlds found their power restored. Famine-struck planets awoke to find food crates dropped from orbit, all bearing the same emblem. Two hands reaching for each other, the mark of the Terrans. No fleet, no name, no message, just action. The Council could not stop it. They could not even trace it. The humans moved like ghosts, unseen but everywhere. Their silence louder than any declaration of war. The oppressed began to whisper their name with reverence. The Silent Reclaimers. A title born not of terror but of hope. Back on Zarth Prime, the people built a new shrine beside Vale Tor's monument, carved from the same alloy as the Terran ship's landing struts. On its surface was etched a phrase in both languages. They returned not to demand forgiveness, but to remind us how to give it. Every night, lights glowed around it like stars, and children came to leave flowers. Stories of the humans spread like fire. Their voices carried through generations as songs. The galaxy that once erased them now began to worship their memory. And somewhere, deep in the void where no light reached, aboard a hidden ship traveling through the black, Elias sat alone in his quarters, looking at the small silver crest Vale Tor had once held. He turned it slowly in his hand, the metal warm from his touch, and he whispered to the empty air, "You were right, old friend, mercy lasts longer than fear." He looked out through the viewport, where the stars blurred into streaks of light, and in that moment, he understood what humanity had become. Not conquerors, not saviors, but a reminder carved into the heart of creation itself, that even in the endless cold of space, the warmth of a kept promise could ignite an entire galaxy. Across the galaxy the silence became unbearable. News of humanity's mercy spread faster than any fleet, faster than fear itself, and in every corner of the stars, rulers and rebels alike whispered the same question. What do the Terrans want? The Council's networks overflowed with panic. Some claimed humanity was building a shadow empire, others feared they had returned to pass judgment. But none of them could ignore the truth that hung over every world like a second sun. The humans had power beyond comprehension. Yet they used it not for war but for compassion. It terrified them more than any weapon ever could. In the great chamber of the Council, the High Speaker paced before the delegates, his robes dragging across the marble floor, his voice trembling though he tried to mask it with command. "We must find their intention. No civilization acts with such restraint unless it hides something greater." But in his eyes, even he knew the truth. He had once fought against humans, and he remembered their eyes, the quiet certainty of beings who never needed to boast, because they had already endured the worst the universe could offer. In the deep silence of hyperspace, the Terran fleet drifted like shadows through the void, hundreds of ships, their lights dim, their movements precise, each one carrying not armies but supplies, medical pods, terraforming drones, and archives filled with knowledge banned by the Council. Aboard the flagship Eidolon, Commander Arya Ward stood before a vast holographic map, her officers waiting for orders. The blue light reflected across her face as she spoke quietly. "We've delivered aid to 23 colonies, no resistance yet." Her voice was calm but distant. One officer frowned. "Commander, the Council is mobilizing a fleet along the rim. They claim we're destabilizing order." Arya's gaze hardened. "Order built on silence is no order at all," she said. "They called us ghosts. Now let them see what ghosts do." We remember. On Zarth Prime, weeks had passed since the humans departed. Yet their presence lingered like light after sunset. The cities glowed brighter, the crops thrived, and the people who once lived in despair now carried hope like fire in their hands. But among them, One figure moved differently, a young scholar named Laren, who had studied the old myths of the Terrans before the archives were purged. He now spent his nights decoding what little remained of human history, and the deeper he read, the more he understood that the Terran's return was not about debt. It was about legacy. One evening he stood before Veiltor's monument and whispered, "You didn't summon them to save us, did you? You summoned them to save what we lost in ourselves." The wind carried his words softly, as if the old alien spirit was listening. Meanwhile, far beyond the known systems, Elias Ward sat alone in his quarters aboard the Soul Requiem, the soft hum of the engines filling the quiet. Before him flickered the recording of the Council's last transmission. Cold threats hidden behind formal words. Human vessels are to cease all unauthorized activity or face unified military response. Elias replayed it twice, then turned the screen off, his reflection staring back at him in the dark glass, tired but steady. His thoughts drifted to the faces of the Zarth children who had offered him flowers, to Veiltor's last words, to the meaning of the promise itself. Humanity had vanished for a century not out of weakness but out of necessity. They had needed to disappear to become something better, something the galaxy couldn't corrupt, and now they had returned not for revenge, but to remind creation that light survives even in silence. He leaned back in his chair and whispered, "We are what they made us fear and what they need us to be." As the Terran fleets moved quietly across the stars, helping the forgotten and healing the broken, the Council's fear turned into action. They began to prepare a weapon. An ancient prototype hidden since the Purge Wars, a planetary disruptor capable of tearing gravity itself apart. Its name whispered only in the archives, the Severance, built to end the humans should they ever return. The speaker ordered its reactivation in secret. His advisors begged him to reconsider, but his fear had turned to desperation. "They will end us by example," he hissed. "If we cannot destroy their strength, we will destroy their hope." Across the galaxy, workers in hidden stations reawakened the monstrous machine, unaware that every move they made was already being watched. Deep in Terran Command's hidden network, sensors began to hum softly, detecting gravitational ripples unlike anything recorded before. On the Eidolon, Arya received the report, her brow furrowed. "They're awakening something," she murmured. "Something ancient?" She opened a secure channel to Elias. His face appeared on her screen. "The Severance," he said quietly before she could ask. "It was built to annihilate us, to erase entire systems by collapsing their stars. I never thought they'd dare to use it again." Arya's voice hardened. "If they do, millions will die." Elias looked away, the shadow of sorrow crossing his face. "We'll stop them, not by force, but by truth." Arya frowned. "Truth won't stop a weapon." Elias looked back, his voice almost a whisper. "It will stop those who fire it." On the Council world of Lyrith, the Severance core began to pulse, energy flooding into its crystalline heart. Engineers monitored the readings with growing horror. It was unstable, far too powerful to control. But the speaker stood at the observation deck, his gaze fixed on the hologram of the Terran fleet, hatred twisting with guilt in his eyes. "They think themselves gods," he muttered. "We will remind them what gods can bleed." But in the corner of the room, the oldest counselor, an aged being with eyes like glass, spoke weakly. "And what if they remind us what gods forgive?" The speaker turned sharply, his voice rising. "Enough!" Back aboard the Soul Requiem, Elias received confirmation. The Severance was active, coordinates locked on Zarth Prime. His hands clenched, his chest tightened. The people they had just saved were about to be sacrificed out of fear. He rose slowly, his voice steady but burning with emotion. "We're moving." His crew responded instantly, no hesitation. The ship's engines roared to life, space folded around them, and within seconds they tore through the void toward Zarth Prime. When they emerged near the system, the sky was already alive with energy. The crimson star at its center pulsed violently, space-time bending in chaotic waves. Elias whispered under his breath, "They would burn a world to prove they're not afraid." And in that moment, he decided humanity would show the galaxy what courage truly meant. He opened the communication channel directly to the Council flagship, his face appearing across every bridge, every command deck, his voice low but thunderous. You stand on the edge of repeating the greatest sin in galactic history. You would destroy what we healed. You would burn mercy because you cannot control it. We will not let you?" The speaker shouted back. "You have no authority here, Terran." But Elias didn't raise his voice. He simply said, "We have memory, and that is enough." As he spoke, the Terran fleet appeared behind him, thousands of ships emerging from hyperspace in perfect silence, their formation beautiful and terrifying, gold light illuminating the darkness, not as a threat, but as a declaration that humanity had returned to protect life, not take it. Inside the Severance station, systems began to fail one by one, not from attack but from override. The Terrans had infiltrated the core with a pulse of code that mirrored the ancient frequency of Veiltor's final beacon. The weapon recognized it as a cease command from the very species that had built it long ago with human aid. Lights dimmed, power faded, the core went cold, the weapon silenced itself. The engineers stared in disbelief. One whispered, "They built this with us, and they remembered." And across the galaxy, the weapon died before it could scream. When it was over, Elias stood before the view of Zarth Prime, its star calming again, the light soft and warm, his voice quiet. "We did not save them because we owed them, we saved them because we could." His crew looked at him, waiting for orders, but he gave none. Instead, he watched as the transmissions flooded the network. Messages from other worlds thanking them, calling them guardians, not ghosts. In that silence, he understood the depth of what had begun. The promise Veiltor made had rippled beyond life and death. Humanity had not just repaid a debt, they had reignited the soul of the galaxy. And as the stars reflected on his face, Elias Ward whispered into the dark, "Maybe this time, they'll remember for more than 1,000 years." The galaxy breathed again, but it was not peace. It was the kind of silence that comes after thunder, the kind that shakes hearts more than the storm itself. News of the Severance weapons shutdown spread faster than light. The Council denied responsibility, claiming malfunction, but no one believed them, not anymore. For the people of the stars had seen the truth unfold before their eyes. They had watched humanity stop a doomsday device not with fire or fear, but with memory. Across the worlds, songs began to rise, songs of the Terrans, of the ones who kept their word when the rest forgot theirs. The galaxy's children sang of golden ships moving through the void like guardians of the lost. And even in the shadowed corners of empires, people whispered the same phrase in quiet reverence, "We remember." The Council's hold was crumbling, not because of war, but because mercy had proven stronger than law. On Zarth Prime, dawn rose with a golden hue, soft and clean. The sky no longer tainted by the storm left behind by the Severance's failed activation. The people gathered in the central plaza, where Veiltor's monument now glowed brighter than ever, powered by the energy the humans had left behind. Flowers of alien crystal bloomed at its base, reflecting light into the air like a rainbow made of glass. A child stood before it holding a small metal pendant engraved with the Terran crest. She whispered softly to her mother, "They came back for us?" And her mother replied through tears, "No, child. They came back for everyone." In orbit above the planet, the Sol Requiem and its fleet drifted in perfect silence, engines dormant, hulls shining softly under the sunlight. Captain Elias Ward stood at the observation deck, his reflection caught in the vast window before him. He looked tired but peaceful. Beside him stood Lieutenant Mara Voss, her voice low. "The Council hasn't spoken since the Severance incident." Elias nodded slowly. "They will," he said. "But this time it won't be to threaten." Mara hesitated, her gaze softening. "Do you think they'll ever understand why we did this?" Elias smiled faintly, a ghost of sadness behind it. "Understanding isn't required," he said. "Remembrance is." Later, a communication signal arrived from an unregistered channel. Its frequency old, Terran, but not from the fleet. Elias frowned. "Patch it through." The hologram flickered to life, revealing a small, trembling image. An alien elder sitting before a crowd on a distant colony, his voice cracked with age. "To the Terrans, wherever you are," he said, "we were taught to fear you, to despise you, but now our children say your name with hope. They draw your crest in the sand and say it means trust. You have changed more than worlds, you have changed hearts." The message ended with a single phrase written in old human language. "Thank you for remembering us. Elias stood still, his jaw tightening, and for the first time in years he felt tears form behind his eyes. Back on the council world of Lyrith, chaos ruled beneath the marble halls. The High Speaker had resigned in disgrace. His fleets disbanded. His records exposed to the public, revealing the truth about the Severance Project. Massive protests erupted in the cities, voices crying for the end of tyranny, and through the smoke of rebellion, a strange calm began to grow. For the first time in centuries, the people did not turn to their leaders for guidance. They turned their eyes toward the stars, waiting for the Terrans to appear again, not as saviors, but as symbols of what could still be right in a broken galaxy. And in that longing, the Council's power began to crumble completely. In the hidden depths of Terran command, far from any star, Commander Arya Ward stood in the central hall surrounded by hundreds of officers. The atmosphere was solemn but radiant. Every screen around them displayed the same image. Worlds being rebuilt, citizens cheering, the human crest projected above their skies. She turned to her people and said quietly, "We have done what we came to do. We showed them mercy, and we reminded them what it means to keep faith when faith is gone." She paused, her voice trembling slightly. "But the galaxy's memory is short, and kindness fades if not protected. Our mission is not over. It has only changed. We are not soldiers anymore. We are the keepers of remembrance." Her words carried through the hall like a hymn, and every human in that room stood in silent agreement, for they knew the truth. Mercy, once given, must be guarded forever. Meanwhile, Elias found himself standing alone on the surface of Zarth Prime, at the exact place where Veiltor had once died, the ground now covered in grass and shimmering dew. He knelt and placed his hand on the soil, closing his eyes. The wind carried the faint whisper of distant laughter from the city, the sound of life continuing, and he smiled to himself. "You did it, old friend," he whispered. "You made them remember." He looked up toward the faint shadow of his ship in the sky, gleaming like a star, and added softly, "And we kept our word." As night fell, a strange event unfolded across the heavens. Stars flickered and aligned for a brief moment, forming the symbol of two hands reaching for each other. The Terran emblem, visible to every world in the system. Scientists called it coincidence, but the people called it a sign. Children pointed to the sky and said, "They're watching." While elders prayed in silence, thanking the ones who had come back from myth, the moment lasted less than a minute. But in that time, every being who saw, it felt something deep inside, a pull of unity that words could not explain. The following days brought a quiet transformation. The council worlds began to send transmissions not of commands, but of apology, one by one. The leaders who had once ordered the extinction of humankind now spoke words of regret, their voices hollow but sincere. To the people of Earth, one message said, "We took your kindness for weakness, we feared what we could not understand. We ask now not for forgiveness, but for remembrance." The transmission spread across every Terran channel, and, though the humans never responded, the silence itself was answer enough, for silence, when born of peace, speaks louder than any words. In the archives of the Terran fleet, Arya recorded the final entry of the mission, her voice steady. "Operation Remembrance is complete, Zarth Prime restored, the Severance neutralized, the Council exposed. Humanity's return has changed the course of the galaxy, not through domination, but through dignity." She paused, her eyes glancing at the stars beyond the window. "May we never again forget who we were when the world turned against us, and may they never forget who we became when we returned." That night, aboard the Soul Requiem, Elias stood on the bridge as the ship prepared for departure. The stars stretched before him endless and waiting, the crew silent, each lost in their own thoughts. He whispered softly, almost to himself, "The dead is gone, but the promise remains." As the engines hummed to life, he turned to his officers and said, "Set course for the frontier worlds. There are still those who think the light has left them." And with that, the Terran fleet moved once more into the darkness, golden trails marking their path like the writing of history itself. Their ships disappearing beyond the stars, leaving behind a galaxy forever changed. And on Zarth Prime, as the people looked up at the sky, they saw one last glimmer of gold vanish into the night, and though they could no longer see the Terrans, they could feel them, the warmth of their mercy, the strength of their silence, the unbreakable truth of their promise. Humanity had not just returned. It had risen beyond vengeance, beyond pain, beyond the need to be feared, and in that rise, it had done what no empire ever could. It had taught the galaxy that even in the coldest dark, compassion burns brighter than any sun, and that once a promise is kept, its light never fades. The galaxy did not forget. Not this time. Not after the light they had seen. The name Terran, once whispered in fear, now carried through every language as a symbol of hope. A story told from star to star, generation to generation. Mothers telling their children that the ones who vanished into silence came back not to conquer, but to heal. In the years that followed, the council was no more. Its towers crumbled under the weight of its own guilt. The old banners burned quietly in the halls where arrogance once ruled, and in their place rose something new. A coalition of worlds bound not by fear or treaties, but by gratitude, and at the heart of this new dawn, there was always the same mark etched into stone and metal and memory. Two hands reaching for one another, one human, one alien, the promise that saved the stars. On Zarth Prime, the new capital of the coalition, the great plaza was alive with life. Alien merchants, human envoys, children from both worlds running together under silver banners that caught the sunlight. In the center stood the monument of Veiltor, its surface gleaming brighter than ever, surrounded by flowers and offerings from every world, holographic petals floating through the air like whispers of peace. The monument had been expanded since the day of the Terran's departure. Now beside Veiltor's statue stood another figure, sculpted from crystal and steel. A human captain with calm eyes and an open hand extended toward the stars. The plaque beneath read in both languages, Captain Elias Ward, the keeper of the promise, and under it, a smaller line carved by children long after, he made the galaxy remember. High above the city, the Sol Requiem floated quietly in orbit, a relic now more than a ship, its golden hull bearing the scars of history, its engines resting, its crew mostly gone, but the ship still alive, its core still humming like a heartbeat. Elias Ward remained aboard, older now, his hair silver, his eyes softer, yet the same calm strength lingered in them. He spent his days watching the planet below, watching the world Veiltor died for bloom into something beautiful. His logbook full of letters he would never send. His nights filled with thoughts of those who never saw this peace. Sometimes he spoke aloud to the empty bridge, as if the ghosts of his old crew still listened. "We did what we came to do," he would say quietly. "And they learned, old friend, they truly learned." In the council square below, a ceremony began, the first day of remembrance. A holiday created not to mourn but to honor the moment humanity changed everything. People from every species gathered, candles glowing like stars across the plaza. The air thick with emotion. The High Chancellor of the new alliance stood before the crowd, her voice trembling as she spoke. "Once, we built weapons to erase each other, and then a species we called extinct came back to teach us something greater than survival. They taught us grace, they taught us to remember." Her words echoed through the city and up toward the heavens, where satellites relayed them across every world, even to the edges of uncharted space, where no council had ever reached, and wherever the words were heard, silence followed, not in fear but in reverence. Aboard the Sol Requiem, Elias listened to the broadcast, the sound soft through the speakers. His hand rested on the old silver crest of the two hands that he now kept beside his command chair. The same crest Veiltor once protected. The metal worn smooth from years of touch. As the Chancellor's words faded, a new sound filled the air. A melody, faint and ancient, the song of the humans, the one played only once before. When the last Terran fleet went silent a century ago, Elias closed his eyes. As the music drifted through the ship, low and mournful yet filled with warmth, he could almost see them again. The faces of his crew, the hope in their eyes, the faith they carried when the galaxy had none, and for the first time in many years, he smiled, not with pride, but with peace. As the years passed, humanity became something greater than legend. They did not rule, they guided. Their fleets became shepherds of the void, traveling to dying worlds to bring life, to forgotten colonies to bring light. They carried no flag but one, a golden crest of mercy. Their voices calm, their message simple, "We remember." And wherever they went, the wars ceased, the hatred slowed, because every species knew that somewhere, in the vast dark, the Terrans were watching, not as conquerors, not as gods, but as keepers of a promise that outlived empires. One quiet night, Elias sat alone on the bridge, the ship bathed in starlight, his hands folded over the crest, his breath slow, the room filled with the soft hum of the engines that had carried him across centuries. Outside, the stars drifted past like falling embers. He spoke softly, as if to the void itself. Veiltor, my friend, the galaxy stands on your faith. He paused, looking toward the planet one last time, its surface glowing with cities and lights, its people singing under the twin moons. We kept your debt, and you kept our memory? His voice faltered slightly, full of the ache of a man who had carried too much for too long. Perhaps now, the debt is repaid, and the promise fulfilled. He rose slowly and walked to the main viewport, the stars reflecting in his eyes, and for a moment he thought he saw her. Commander Arya Ward, young again, standing beside him with that same look of steady pride, behind her the faces of his lost crew, smiling quietly as if waiting for him to rest. He exhaled softly and whispered, "I'm coming home." The ship's lights dimmed gently as if answering, the hum fading into silence, and when the first rays of the Zarth sunrise touched the hull, the soul, Requiem drifted with them, motionless and serene. The ship that had once carried the weight of a promise now finally at peace. When they found the soul Requiem years later, she was still intact, floating just above the orbit of Zarth Prime. Her system silent but her core still warm, and in the captain's chair, they found Elias Ward, eyes closed, hand resting on the crest, his final log recorded in the ship's archive, his voice calm and faint but eternal. If you are hearing this, know that humanity did not vanish into the dark. We became it. We became the light that waits beyond fear, the voice that answers when hope calls. We owed a debt, and we repaid it with memory to Veiltor, to Zarth Prime, to the galaxy itself. We came not to rule but to remind, not to conquer but to care, and when we leave again, let the stars themselves remember what mercy looks like. And so they did, for ages after. The story of the Terrans became the song of the stars, carried by traders, wanderers, and dreamers. The myth that had once frightened children now brought them comfort. No longer ghosts or destroyers, the humans became something else entirely. The proof that light, once born, can never truly die. In the end, the galaxy did not just remember their return, it remembered their heart, and as the last line of his recording played across the heavens, the words that began it all returned once more like a heartbeat through time, acknowledged. We remember.